Hello, everybody, and good afternoon. My name is Mike Petrilli. I'm the president of the Thomas B. Fordham Institute, and I am super excited to be co-hosting today's webinar with the Carnegie Corporation of New York. We are going to learn today about the Profiles in Collective Leadership initiative that Carnegie has been working on in recent years, and especially about three of their grantees that are doing some incredible work on the ground. I live here in Washington, D.C., and I don't have to tell all of you that we are living through some incredibly polarized and challenging political times. And at times like this, it can become really frustrating for any of us who are looking for solutions, including in our world in education. But sometimes when things at the national level seem like they are broken, consensus is hard to find, the best thing is to get out there into the real world and get outside the beltway and the bubble and go find places on the ground where people are still doing great work, rolling up their sleeves and getting things done. And that really was the spirit, as I understand it, of the Profiles in Collective Leadership initiative. This initiative has identified some fantastic work going on around the country that is all about solving problems, about doing it collectively, about making sure that our schools are working with partners at the local level to help their students and to serve their students better, with a particular focus on civic engagement as well as on pathways for students to success. And so I'm really excited today to hear more about this and to learn myself about what these grantees have been up to. I think for all of us, it could be a real shot in the arm and some inspiration. Which we need right now, maybe more than ever. The way it's going to go today is first, I am going to interview two of the great people that have been leading this initiative, LaVerne and Jade, and talk about what they were hoping to get out of it and what they've seen so far from this initiative. And then they, in turn, are going to moderate a conversation with three of the grantees from the program. And we will have some time, we hope, for some Q&A at the end. So definitely do use that Q&A button, I believe, or maybe the chat button, if you've got a question for our panelists. And we'll try to make sure that we get those in there. Okay, so with that, let me first of all welcome LaVerne and Jade. LaVerne is the Vice President for National Program and Program Director for Education at the Carnegie Corporation of New York. LaVerne, thanks so much for being with us today and for co-hosting this webinar.
Thank you, Mike. Happy to be here.
Yeah, and then Jade Grieve, who is Chief of Student Pathways at the New York City Public Schools. Jade, welcome to you.
Thanks so much, Mike. Looking forward to this discussion.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's kick it right off here with some questions for the two of you, and really just help introduce us to this idea of this initiative, and tell us what was it? Why was it at Carnegie that you wanted to initiate this project?
Perfect. Thanks so much, Mike, for the opportunity. So as you said, there have been intensely polarized times, but also times of really high anxiety post-COVID, wondering what the future of opportunity looked like for our young people in this country. There was a lot of struggle, a lot of challenges, and a lot of concerns. And the narrative around education, what people were hearing about was mostly about those challenges and barriers, and very little about what was going right and where it was going right and how. What were the ways that positive things were happening for young people, both in their educational opportunities and in their opportunities to actually pursue civic engagement and have a pathway to some type of social economic mobility. So as we thought about that, we said, you know, we believed and quite frankly expected really that there were communities all over this country where people were coming together and creating opportunity for young people to have an opportunity to engage in both meaningful education as well as pursue career opportunities, and that was happening in a way, as I had heard stories through my travels and through the work, as you said, sort of getting out of, in our case, getting off the 30th floor of Madison Avenue in New York, or the 30th floor on 50th. We got out in the community, and I kept meeting people, Mike, who were engaged in having actually co-created with local partners in communities incredible initiatives to engage young people. And so we wanted to learn more about that, and we wanted to, if we found those places where this work was happening, and we believed it was happening in red, blue, and purple states across the country, that maybe one thing we could do at this highly both polarized and in a time of anxiety is lift up their stories, lift up their work, give people an opportunity to hear what they were doing and how they were doing it, to potentially both be inspired by that and believe it was possible for them to do it themselves in their communities as well. So the idea was to provide a grant opportunity, provide some support to, as I said, tell their stories, and then create a community among them to learn together, share together, with ultimately the opportunity to share those learnings with the broader field. And thanks, because we wanted to model the partnership that we believed we would find, we partnered with Transcend, who is a nonprofit organization doing incredible work, helping schools and communities really reimagine and understand how to center student learning. They've been an incredible partner in actually curating and creating this opportunity for learning amongst all of the other grantees.
Okay, fantastic. Great. Well, let's zero in a little bit more on some of the terms we're talking about today, just so we can all have a common understanding. So civic engagement, that's something that you focus on quite a bit. Tell us what that means for you.
Yeah, so civic engagement, it's interestingly enough, when we started on thinking about this project, we first thought about it from the standpoint of creating what we called post-secondary pathways. In other words, opportunities for young people to have access to both, upon graduating from high school, having the opportunity to get a meaningful credential that would help them get a mobility wage job, or pursue a pathway to college, and then ultimately career. And, as you know, Mike, we spent a lot of time focused on high school graduation and preparing kids for college. And we always said for college and careers, but I don't think we did that as successfully as we could. What we were separately focused on the purpose, the importance of civic engagement, which to us meant both a baseline, a foundation of civic learning, really understanding and knowing how our government works, but also the opportunity to, within communities and more broadly nationally, to understand both how to exercise and apply the knowledge of civic learning in a real context. So what would it mean in my community to have a voice, to identify an issue and be able to work on and make a difference in our community toward a particular goal or outcome, or accomplish something that would basically improve and help the community thrive. So we went into this thinking it was a pathways, and that there would be potentially the opportunity through that work being collective, and in partnership, you'd see some civic engagement. But in fact, many of those grantees came back to us and said these were actual incredible acts of civic engagement coming together across sectors in the community to create opportunity.
Yeah, I like that. So it's both getting students to understand how to engage civically, but also just that the project itself was a great example of it, because these different organizations had to work together. I like that. And of course, this focus on pathways. You're right, LaVerne. We've always been talking about college and career, but I think a lot of us know that the big focus for many years was on the college piece. And the pendulum has swung. There's now a lot more enthusiasm for the career side as well. Of course, we need to do that right. So let's bring Jade into the conversation. Jade, you're leading the Office of Student Pathways for the New York City Public Schools, which I understand you oversee multiple career-connected learning initiatives for students. So Tell us about those and tell us a little bit about the community partnerships that's a part of this work.
Thanks, Mike. Happy to talk about that topic any day, and especially here. And thanks, LaVerne, for the invitation. So as you said, yes, I oversee New York City Public School Student Pathways Office and Strategy, and that's really taken on a very strong focus here for the city under this administration and with Chancellor Banks. And in fact, one of the first things that we did was to really refresh and re-up the district's mission across the city, which now states for New York City Public Schools that our goal really is around ensuring every student is prepared and on a pathway to a rewarding career and long-term economic security, and equipped to be a force for change. I don't start all kind of sentences out by sharing the mission, but I think it's relevant to share in a couple of ways. One, I think what both you and LaVerne have narrated in terms of like the point of change that we're at and how we're thinking about this work. And secondly, it also touches on very clearly both of those concepts that LaVerne and Carnegie are lifting up around the importance of social and economic mobility, the connection to education as a driver of that, and also the concept of kind of civic engagement and really ensuring that we're preparing young people to be agents for change in their communities. And a big part of that, we know, is around ensuring they have the skills, the knowledge, the experience, the networks, and the ability to kind of make those choices and opportunities for themselves, which are strong post-secondary and successful post-secondary pathway gives them those options. So as you mentioned, one of the major ways that we're really like driving this new mission here in New York City is through career-connected learning. And so we're using that as our vehicle really for reimagining the student experience and to bring more relevant, contextualized, and engaging learning opportunities for young people, and also thinking differently about what they're learning, where they're learning, certainly inside the classroom, but in real world opportunities in business with internships, apprenticeships, that kind of thing, and who they're learning from, and kind of really building that network and using the city truly as kind of a learning lab with our partnerships with business and with post-secondary. And so one of our major initiatives here is called Future Ready NYC. And what that's striving to achieve is to infuse and to universalize the skills that we know every student needs for success in today's economy, regardless of their pathway, but also bringing into stronger focus the chance for students to get on a college and career pathway while they're in high school, and giving them the chance to learn through the prism of in-demand, high opportunity, high wage careers, and leaving that kind of transition to post-secondary success less to chance, if you like, and more of a certainty because they've started that while they're with us and they have confidence and a sense of where they're heading. And so just to kind of come back, I guess, to your question, Mike, by definition, that work is blurring the lines between school, college, post-secondary, and work. The whole idea really is that, and so we cannot do that work alone. Our partners in the post-secondary space, our labour partners, community-based organisations who have done such a lift in this space for such a long time, and business partners, they all need to be aligned and kind of we're all need to be kind of rowing in the same direction with the same sense of purpose and kind of really plugging in to build an ecosystem around this work because it's no longer about schooling happening over here and then college happens later and then career success comes later. That formula just doesn't work for most students, as our data tells us really clearly. So it's very complex in implementation. And I think one of the things that is really exciting about what Carnegie and the leaders that are profiled here today are going to lift up is the different ways that we're all solving for that. Really, some of the challenges are that this kind of like the depth of partnership that it takes between us, a school system, between business partners, expanding our post-secondary partnerships, really butts up against the way in which sometimes our like infrastructure, our systems, our resourcing, and that's not New York City. I think that's like broadly true, aren't necessarily designed kind of with that alignment in mind. And so it takes, leadership a commitment to kind of that end goal, thinking differently about how we partner, truly dedicating resources and capacity to make those partnerships work, because it really is kind of, you need to be kind of hand in glove all the time. And I think LaVerne mentioned kind of co-created. It can't be that we're saying, here's what we need and everyone else come and deliver. And I think that's true kind of regardless of where you are sitting on that kind of the ecosystem that I described of all of those different partners. But I think just to kind of tie a thread around like where you started too, Mike, this work is critical, I think, in being responsive to, frankly, things we've heard for years and maybe decades around like long-held kind of talent and skills gap that businesses and employers report. And that's true nationally, although there is a different flavor, kind of, city or state or region, which is why I think the kind of profiling of those different opportunities is so valuable. But it also responds to, what we know students need in terms of being more successful. And I would say one thing that's been a real theme, I still don't know if we're quite able to say post-pandemic. I hope we are, but given that there's been some COVID going around lately, but it's responsive to what students want too. They are asking with more intentionality, tell me why I need to learn this and how this is relevant to my future. And help kind of make sure I'm prepared for that. And so really what we're doing here is kind of tying the thread there between and allowing students to be on that pathway while they're with us. So it's really not easy work. I think it's so commendable that Carnegie have lifted up the leaders in different places that are doing this work. It's super valuable for us to learn about different ideas, innovations, to think about the way these partnerships are coming together. And I think also the lift up of these different models and leaders really can be important fuel for all of us that are in this work, because it is hard work, but it's super important work and so responsive to the moment. So I'm excited to hear more from the leaders that we have with us today.
And tell us though, Jade, I mean, this all sounds so great, right? And yet I know from personal experience trying to put programs like this into place, like it is not easy to figure out, let's say, how to give 16 or 17-year-olds meaningful experiences in workplaces, right? I mean, the employers might be excited at first, but then you have to actually say, all right, what are you going to do with this 16-year-old? I mean, here we are in the middle of the summer. A lot of us have summer interns. We're trying to keep busy and engage and make sure they have a good experience. And in our case, we're talking about graduate students. You're talking about 16, 17, 18-year-olds. So, I mean, how do you make sure that it's actually an experience that's a positive one for the students, for the employers, and learns at least to some significant learning, to maybe a credential that really does get them off to this positive start?
Yeah. Well, look, that's a question that could take a 30-minute response that we don't have time for. So I'll try.
Yes, you have 2 minutes, Elsa.
Touch on a few of the key points there. One, and look, I think it's especially challenging in New York City, where we're the largest district. We have 1,800 schools. So what we're doing here really has to work in many different ways, and for many different schools and students. A few things that we're really focused on. One is the intentionality of the design of the program. I think we have to make sure that experiences, the courses, do lead and culminate in whether that's an industry credential you can take in high school or an accelerated stepping stone to a degree. So there's intentionality in the design that's important. Secondly, I think one other thing that we've paid a lot of attention to is building a framework that makes it easier for employers to tap into. I think you said this well, that employers want to help, but then it gets hard. And that's because they don't know, and it's also not their job to understand the school system, and they haven't necessarily been working with, as you say, 16, 17-year-olds. And so I think the framework and kind of setting quality standards and expectations, we've been giving significant resources to schools to help them hire the right kind of team and bring people to support students and prepare them for those experiences, and also just establishing the kind of expectations in terms of readiness, and that there's a kind of consistency in what businesses are expecting and where they're plugging in. So I think some of that is important. The last thing I will say to that question is, and this relates to the partnership question you asked, again, it's not something that we can do alone. We really value and leverage and benefit from community-based organizations that live in this space of the world of intermediaries, if you like, the term that's been used a lot. So sitting between schools and businesses, kind of helping to translate kind of the readiness expectations to kind of ensure, even down to sometimes the paperwork that's necessary to get into one of these opportunities. But I also think there's been something in the last couple of years that really employers are looking to lean in a different way, and making it easy is kind of critical to make sure this can work. And we've benefited from some incredible partners in Google, in Northwell Health, who are really kind of helping to chart a different course. And the last thing I'll say there is I think part of that has been really building not one-off, but deep partnerships where they're actually seeing students from 9th to 10th to 11th to 12th grade. And so they're getting a sense of the students, of the school. And I think that kind of relationship building and consistency goes a long way.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you, LaVerne and Jade. I think I am now going to pass the microphone off to you, and you can bring in our next panel. It was really nice to speak to you. And again, thanks for allowing me, and my dog, Thunder, who is more excited than he may look, to be a part of this.
Terrific. Thank you. Thanks, Jade. So Jade and I will, I'm going to introduce our panelists, and Jade and I are going to ask them some questions. So you just got a deep dive into what's happening in New York City, and now you'll get an opportunity to hear what some of our wonderful grantees are doing in the profiles and collective leadership community. So first we have Dr. Kim Alexander, and as you can see, he's the CEO of Collegiate Edu-Nation. Superintendent Mike Matsuda, and he's obviously the superintendent of the Anaheim Union High School District, and Andrea Russell, who's a program manager for the Mosaic Center for Work, Life, and Learning, and she's connected to what we call the IU Health Initiative. So you're going to hear more from each of them as we engage in conversation with them. So I'm going to pass the baton next to Jade, I think, who's going to start us off with a question to Superintendent Matsuda.
Thank you, LaVerne. Excited to kick us off here. So yes, Superintendent Matsuda, I'm going to ask this first question to you. Your work focuses on building 5 critical skills that you've identified are necessary for college, for career, and for life. So communication, collaboration, creativity, critical thinking, character, and compassion. Can you tell us a little bit about how do you build students' capacity in these areas, and how do you see this translating to increased civic engagement?
Thank you, and thank you, LaVerne and Carnegie, for the opportunity to participate in this panel and this grant opportunity. Jade, first of all, I think you described the changed architecture that's needed for schools in terms of the partnerships beyond the schoolhouse, right? In terms of the corporate and nonprofit partners and higher ed partners to give students many more opportunities. And Mike Petrilli was asking the question about, meaningful. How do we create pathways to meaningful and purposeful jobs? And that's where the change is going on inside school systems, because we're talking about teasing out students' passion and purpose and developing meaning. And that's getting inside the student, the intrinsic motivation that we're all looking for. And for us, if you can think of the construct of a TED Talk, we have many TED Talks called soapbox speeches in our English classes. We are a 7 through 12 district, and a TED Talk is a great construct, very complex stuff going on. And it's about telling your story. It's also about sharing what happened in your life that interests you. It's about researching that and beginning to connect the dots, whatever your passion or issue is, and asking who benefits, who wins, who loses, and who's responsible. And then doing something about that. And that's where the civic engagement comes in. And that's where we start getting kids to begin to think about potential careers or majors. And then it's up to us, the school system, to provide that infrastructure that you so eloquently described, Jade. So students have those meaningful experiences while they're in high school. And we're a 7 through 12 district. We have about 120 corporate and nonprofit partners. So the 5 C's that we call them are really the language of business. And I think many of us struggle to speak the language of business, and parents too. They want young people who can communicate well, both oral and written. Collaboration, of course, is a big challenge. How do we teach kids to collaborate and work together toward a common objective? Critical thinking, certainly creativity and innovation. And I think the fifth one is for us is compassion and character. And compassion begins with self-compassion. But these taken together, again, if you think about the construct of a TED Talk, there's a lot of reflection, a lot of complexity going on in there. And the reflection is really about finding meaning. What many educators now are talking about, transcendent thinking, being able to transcend whatever the experience is, reflect on it, and think about how that experience can change you. I'll give you a couple quick examples. Like we have we have amazing teachers, as every district does. And those who take the time to create these meaningful experiences, like in dance, for example, where the teacher took the time to understand where the students were coming from. We have a lot of low-income students and high poverty, a lot of gang issues. Young lady was suicidal because her family was, father in prison and lost her mother. And the teacher helped the students develop a dance performance about supporting each other. And it was a beautiful presentation. And then our teachers go one above that in terms of having the students reflect on the dance performance or the art performance or whatever the experience is. And this student reflected transcendent thinking in terms of realizing that she had a voice and that she was not alone and that there are people there to help her. And she truly wants to become like a counselor now in her career choices. We have, as you know, and across certainly in New York, a lot of poverty, a lot of food deprivation, and having teachers think about how developing experiences where students can solve food deserts, right? And so we have students now creating apps where families can access healthy organic vegetables, and then writing and speaking about that in their soapbox speeches. So these types of experiences are happening more and more in terms of feeding into this changed infrastructure that, as you described, Jade, it's very complex, but you need to start somewhere, right? And the teachers are so vital to making this happen. So I think one of the big takeaways for us is to be able to share with other districts that are building these changed infrastructure. And I'm very interested in the type of professional learning that's going on across the country. And in order for students to connect the dots, not only with their passion and purpose, leading to civic engagement, and also leading to career pathways.
That's great. Thank you so much. Over to you, LaVerne.
Terrific. Thank you, Jade. And thank you, Mike. Really appreciate all of you joining us today. I'm going to turn to Andrea. Welcome, Andrea. Good to see you. And Andrea, I want to talk to you a little bit about collaboration and coalition building. Those are essential to comprehensively addressing the kinds of community challenges or creating the kinds of community opportunities that we're talking about. Can you share a little bit about the groups and stakeholders that you engage with in your work, and how did you go about forming these relationships?
Absolutely. And again, thank you for the opportunity. You all touched on a lot already, LaVerne, Mike, and Jade. And I was just sitting here smiling in the back of my head because I can resonate with so much, Jade, that you were doing in New York. There are a holistic program partners that we engage with, because we really want to really come alongside our students in a very intentional way. So we collaborate with a myriad of different industries. The other program manager supporting this program comes from an immigrant family. I'm a first generation college student, and so we are aware of many of the barriers and challenges that exist within urban education. And with that in mind, we think very intentionally about how we can set our students best up for success. And so that starts with engaging youth development partners. Jade, as you talked about your internships, our students start their internships at 14 and 15 years old. And so how can we help our students understand what it means to make good and better decisions? Coming alongside a workforce development partner to help them understand the skills and strengths that are needed to persist in the workplace, but then also how those translate into the classroom. And as we're talking about the classroom, there is the training partner that the school already engages with for their clinical experiences that they have within the different facilities. We want our students to not just think about college as an ideal, but really as an option that is very real for them. And so engaging higher education partners to help them along the way in terms of how to apply to college, how to think about a career, what colleges do you think about that even specialize in the majors that you want to go to, and not just attending a college because it seems fun and glamorous, but really being intentional about that college decision. And we're involving now to include a financial partner to help our students think about financial awareness and literacy, because oftentimes they're going to be first generation wealth earners. And how do they understand what it means not to live paycheck to paycheck? So we meet with our partners very consistently to get their feedback and to help identify what are continued opportunities that they see in young people within a workforce, but also potentially within our program, and how they can maybe meet the need that we're seeing, but also maybe recommend an additional partner that we can leverage to tap into those capacities.
Terrific. And I'll just very quickly, Andrea, there are significant shortages of healthcare workers in your area.
Absolutely.
As I understand it, it may be as many as 600 at a time. And so part of the purpose of this work was to, if I recall correctly, really preparing from a very young age, young people to have a pathway into healthcare careers.
Absolutely. Many of our students, first generation college students, some of them are first generation Americans. English may not be the primary language spoken at home. So when we talk about our students not being affluent, they do not have the exposure. And so we have some very real and transparent goals. This one is to diversify the workplace so that our patient population finds itself in the team member workforce that it looks like, but then also to tap into skilled talent at a very young age. There's no age too young to start thinking about what you might want to do in terms of not when you grow up, but as you continue to grow, what might you be interested, curious, enthusiastic about? So there is no shortage of workforce needs in terms of healthcare, all the way from direct patient care to even doing something that I'm doing in terms of HR. No role is too small when we're thinking about patient care delivery.
Terrific. Thank you, Andrea. I'm going to back to you, Jade.
Thank you, LaVerne. Thanks, Andrea. Such a great answer there. I'm going to ask this next question for Dr. Alexander. Kim, if I can bring you into the discussion here. Be great to hear from you. I touched on this in my answer to a question from Mike, just in terms of how different and sometimes how similar some of these challenges look across the country. But would love to hear from you in respect of civic engagement, kind of bringing communities and partnerships together. What are some of the specific challenges that you identified and seek to address through your work in rural communities specifically?
Well, thank you, Jade, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here and talk about it. Of course, our focus is on rural, and in some respects, rural is different, and we have a lot of challenge. I would say that rural is the new inner city in terms of challenge, just because of the increase in generational poverty over the last several generations, and the suburban movement that began back in the 1950s our best and brightest began leaving for suburban and urban opportunity, never to return, and in a sense, suffering to an extent from rural brain drain. And in Texas specifically, you know, we have record high school graduation rates, but only 22% of the graduates earn any kind of post-secondary credential by age 24. And the estimated loss in lifetime earnings is $202 billion per cohort. In rural sectors, it's even lower, 13%. And so with that in mind, 25 years ago when I was high school principal, I was at Roscoe Collegiate for 32 years, and then the last 17 as superintendent. But we got to looking, and our students would do really well in school, good grades and good test scores. But for most of our disadvantaged students, walking across that graduation stage was like walking off a cliff. The best part of their life was now behind them. So that got us investigating, and in 2009 led to becoming the first rural school-wide early college in Texas, with the expectation that students would earn the associate degree before they graduate high school. Added STEM Academy in 2012, and then in 2017, P-TECH replaced that term, Pathways in Technology Early College High School. And at that time, I told Commissioner Morath, one of the caveats of P-TECH, you can support students an additional 2 years, years 13 and 14. And I told them we're going to use that additional 2 years to bring back graduate degrees to these rural communities. And so in 2019, we had hosted a lot of small and rural schools to look at how we did that. And he asked us to, that's when we formed a nonprofit, Collegiate Edu-Nation. And we exist to help small and rural schools align with higher ed and workforce to address the post-secondary credential crisis. And one of the caveats of generational poverty is low expectations. And so we really started at age 3 on creating a culture of high expectations for all students, where no student is marginalized by the situation into which he or she is born into, of which they have no control. And so we currently work with about 30 districts around Texas. We work very closely with our land grant institution, Texas A&M University, using the land grant infrastructure that's in place in every state to link back to rural education through extension. And now, as a result of the success that we've had in Texas, we're actually having the same conversation in 10 other states that have large, have learned that, you know, from region to region, things vary like culture, dialect, but pretty much the rural dilemma is the same across the board. And so, you know, a lot of the rural issue in agriculture, for example, most students used to graduate high school and there was opportunity on the family farm or ranch. Only fewer than 1% of folks are involved in production agriculture these days. And so it requires a more highly educated population. I believe 99% of the jobs created since 2008 do require post-secondary credentials. So that's what we're doing, and we're trying to move folks in their communities, whether it be 13% success to 90% or greater, with the realization that if we have a more highly educated rural population, that will lead to the innovation that leads to rural job creation. And if there is a silver lining behind the pandemic, it taught us that rural and the wide open spaces looks better than ever. But even more importantly, it taught us that if we will be innovative, we can bring high wage, high demand jobs to rural communities. A prime example, I'd never heard of Zoom about 5 years ago, and today I probably average about 7 a day.
Terrific. Go ahead.
I was going to say that's great. I appreciate your answer there, and It's been, really neat to follow, and by looking at some of your kind of early successes in Roscoe and seeing how that's developing. And just from a K-12 seat, just want to acknowledge and appreciate, I think, what both you and Andrea have touched on in terms of like, this also isn't just high school work. This really is about starting early and can be that fuel to a young person's fire about like what's possible for them and really expanding their horizons. So thank you for that answer.
Terrific. Well, I just want to remind the audience, if you have questions, please don't hesitate to put them either, I guess, in the chat or in the Q&A section, and we can try to incorporate some of them. I think, Jade and I, in the meanwhile, might ask one or two additional questions. As you think about the profiles opportunity, how is the grant helping you, or will the grant help you, or the experience? Because in many ways, our intention with this was not just about the dollar amount of a grant, but about really recognizing your work, like I said before, when Mike asked me, and really uplifting it and helping others both to see what's possible and how it's possible. And it doesn't have to, nor will it look the same in every community everywhere. That's what's so beautiful about it when you get to the thinking about the civic engagement part of it. The inspiring part is really how you all in your various communities have come together to make this work a possibility and make opportunity a possibility for kids. So just, maybe Mike, Kim, and Andrea, just maybe like a moment or two on, how is this opportunity helping you with your work?
Well, I'll start. LaVerne, I think that we are excited about finding the teachers that are doing this great work and systematizing that through an online platform where teachers can share their these experiences that they're developing across content. And so, we have about 1,200 teachers, and we want them to really start these collaborations across the district and identify, a system to identify like who's really out in front and who's doing this stuff. And in building out this architecture that we've begun. So we're really, really excited about the grant helping us curate that. We've already identified some lead teachers and actually some lead students and parents as well to build, really intentionally identify the elements of the architecture that's working.
Thanks, Mike. How about you, Kim and Andrea?
I can go. We can't say how excited we are to be selected as a recipient. Yes, for the financial support, but also to have the opportunity to gain insights from all of the different exemplars so we can continue moving our program forward. That is one of the ways in which we'll utilize the grant, is to think about what are the program enhancements, how we can really create a playbook and a model for sustainment and replication by other industries or organizations that want to adopt the fellowship program, and really how to target individuals at the middle school level. As the fellowship program, our goal is to create a pipeline of ready workforce members, either to go directly into clinical employment or to pursue post-secondary in terms of earning higher credentials in terms of their success. We successfully graduated our first cohort of fellows in May, having started this program in 2021. So now is the opportune time really to pause, review every milestone, every initiative, and how to continue to move the needle forward. Every single student in our first cohort either went directly into clinical employment, is pursuing post-secondary employment, will join a training program, or will enlist in the service and will pursue post-secondary thereafter. And then all of our subsequent cohorts have lofty goals to continue their education in terms of healthcare. And we're excited about that. And we want to do more about reaching middle school students with this grant to make them excited as they select their high schools in middle school based on their pathway. What an opportune and a great time to really engage them in an intentional way so they can see what healthcare has to offer and maybe seeing themselves as that future healthcare leader, regardless of what capacity that it's in. So those are just a few of the ways in which we plan to utilize the funding from Carnegie, but also the knowledge and insights from all of the different exemplars at the table.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Andrea. And Kim?
Well, thank you, LaVerne. And, I mentioned moving our focus from Texas to the national conversation. After 20 years, we've found a whole lot of work in that don't, and we're very interested in sharing that. One of our board members of our nonprofit, Dr. Valerie Truesdale, is from South Carolina, and she's also the chair of the American Association of School Administrators Rural Cohort. So she has a lot of connections around the country, and we've been in conversation with 10 states. In September, we plan to host a national convening in Abilene, Texas, right there by Roscoe, and bring in applicants from 6 to 8 states, and not just superintendents, but a team from the higher ed, from workforce, and even more importantly, policy, and have a conversation, a national conversation among innovative rural leaders on how we might expand this post-secondary credential attainment for all students. The Carnegie Foundation and this grant is what is making that national expansion possible and giving us the capacity to focus beyond the borders of Texas. So we're grateful.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Kim. Jade, I don't know if you're seeing these two questions coming in.
Yeah, I am. There's actually a couple of questions there, which maybe I can collapse into one. A few people have asked, and be great to hear briefly from all of you actually, have asked about and lifted up the critical role that families play in supporting students who are in these pathways programs. I think also just building that awareness about the programs and how to engage. And I think there's some breaking down of the barriers and understanding about what are these new pathways as we kind of talk about a broad range of opportunities for students that if they're not on the radar of families can be challenging to imagine and kind of support students into. So it'd be great to hear it from your individual kind of work in your regions. How are you supporting and engaging families in this critical work?
I can start with taking that, Mike and Superintendent, if you don't mind, because that was actually something I wanted to talk about specifically, in that we intentionally go after, and I say go after, we go after our parents because we are dealing with high school students. And if you're familiar with education, parental, I would say, involvement and engagement tapers off, or it looks different at the high school level. Adults assume their students are more autonomous and independent and may take a hands-off approach, but we want our parents to be all in, because if you're anything like how my parents were, I was voluntold to do a lot of things, even as a high school student. And so we want our parents to not just be on the sideline watching our students, but we want to engage and invite them in as partners. So we have parent night meetings at the start of every single semester so that they're aware of all of the different initiatives that our students will be engaged in. We have targeted and intentional communication with our parents, even ensuring that communication goes out in a language that they are familiar with and can comprehend. We want to support our parents because we recognize that because many of our students are first generation college students, there are some areas and gaps that our parents may not be aware of how to support their student in the best way. And we want our parents to be empowered with that same information. And maybe hopefully our parents may choose to say, you know what, earning the certification, they're pursuing post-secondary. It's never too late for me to pursue education as well. So parent support, we found, was very critical to our success, to hold our students accountable, but also to ensure that our students have a support system in the background.
Yes, and on top of that, to have the orientations with parents. We have hundreds of kids involved in the internships and mentoring. And I think I agree with Andrea, it's vital that the parents are informed and in languages. But the other thing too, and Jade, you had mentioned you had a partnership with Google, we as well. And Google offers certificates in different high impact areas. So we have developed with Google certificates for parents. And we have many underemployed parents and undereducated parents who have benefited because Google certificates are offered in all different types of languages. And then what we've done is hired students to become tutors for their parents. So these are just a few examples, but I would piggyback on what Andrea just said too, vital partners in our work.
I'll just add on to that. Of course, we all know, you know, parental involvement is one of the most challenging things, and especially among economically disadvantaged, a common characteristic of generational poverty is low expectations. And you know, so we feel like to really move the needle, and we're seeing it now, we've been at it long enough, that next generation of parents that is more highly educated, whether it be college or workforce certifications or both, you know, that's really going to move the needle. But our focus, while our focus is on P-TECH and that, we're also very interested in adult education. We know that as fast as the world is changing and that people are going to have to be lifetime learners. And so we've seen some of our parents, as a result of the success that their students, their children have had in earning college degrees and with no student debt, that now we're seeing parents learn from their students, you know, as tutors, as was mentioned. And we think it's going to have a snowball reaction and a positive impact on not just the children, but the parents as well.
Terrific. I think I have time for a really quick rapid fire response for one more question. Why don't we take this one? What is one key must have? So what's a piece of advice you'd share with a community that is about to engage in collaboration between K-12 higher ed workforce around college and career pathways for young people? What's your advice?
One quick response, important response, the shared vision with your stakeholders and with concrete examples of what we mean by college or career readiness.
Thanks, Mike.
To go along with that, I will say, ensure some of those stakeholders are SMEs as well, because we're doing a lot of great work, but there's so many different silos of work being done, and we don't have to reinvent the wheel. And so ensure that stakeholders are SMEs, or you have a direct alignment to some SMEs in your work. And if I would add a sub point to that, I would say never underestimate the power in allowing a student to feel visible. As Kim was talking about, just low expectations. So many students have low expectations of themselves because they don't see, seen, or heard. But once you invest in them, they're able to see a bright future and a path forward to them, all because someone said, great job, or you can do this, or put them in an opportunity or a position to succeed. So really being motivated and keeping the student at the center of all that you do, in addition to all the noise of the partners and stakeholders.
Real quickly, I think another important piece is sort of understanding the needs of the partner, whether it's a community college, higher ed, or business. And I think that's really important. How do you get to win-win? And those are different conversations, and you've got to have the skills and the knowledge about your partners to engage.
And I'll just say that obviously this is very difficult work. And we all know that it's difficult to do difficult work if you know why you're doing it. It's impossible if you don't. So we've got to keep coming back to the why. What we're doing is not working. If 22% is success in any kind of accountability system, that means 78% are not being successful. And as people understand that, then they realize, you know what? We can do better than this. We should do better than this.
Terrific. You know what, Jade? We could probably do one more very quickly, actually. Do you have one you want to add?
Yeah, maybe just one last one to wrap us up. I think this is rapid fire too. Could you maybe each touch on just how you measure progress in this work, given it is so kind of multi-factor with different partners? What's something that you kind of really hang on to or lift up as you're tracking and monitoring your progress?
I think looking for correlations between those and kids that are involved in the career pathways and internships and their grades and attendance, and also being able to disaggregate that by English learners and special ed populations, and trying to get really, what are you doing to reach out to the marginalized communities?
So for the fellowship program, we have some short-term and long-term metrics, because this really is a long game when you're thinking about engaging young people freshman year and wanting them to go to college. You're thinking about, at minimum, that's 8 years before you see very long turnarounds. But there's some of those incremental milestones that we catch, and it's how many certifications and dual credits that our students are earning. Parent night participation. So as we talked about the importance of parents, how many parents are engaged in a very intentional way? What does program participation look like, and how are they progressing through each of the different program milestones? We also intentionally ask our students and parents and program partners for their feedback along the way. So we're monitoring their success. I would say long-term is ensuring that our students don't just get accepted to college, but that they show up day one and they come back after Thanksgiving break and come back after Christmas break, and they persist through college into a career of their choice post-graduation.
And we just begin with the end in mind. At what level are these students, these graduates entering the workforce? What is their, how employable are they, and how much unemployment, how much job satisfaction, how much opportunity for advancement? And we know that as a person enters at a higher level, it improves all the other things. So that's the end game for us.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Really appreciate all of you taking the time to join us today. Jade, Andrea, Kim, and Michael, and Mike Petrilli. Pleasure co-hosting this with you. I guess what I'd like to say is, this was, in some ways we called it the big experiment. Like, what would happen if we, as Mike said, sort of get out of DC or get out of New York and really get out into communities around the country and understand what's happening there and how it's happening. And the extent to which I have been inspired by the work of all of these grantees is I can't even express it. I had the opportunity to personally interview the teams. Remember, these are actually, we only have one person, but these are teams of people working collectively. As Jade said as well, in New York City and the communities, it's people coming together, and it's not easy, right? It's hard. It's figuring it out. We're used to operating in our little institutional, sectors or spaces, and trying to figure out, one of the questions that we didn't get to was someone asking, what would be that one piece of advice that you all could give around institutionally how you made this a seamless experience for students? When we think about the experience of families and young people, we don't make it easy for them, right? They go through a K-12 system that they may have, I don't know how many breaks in along that way, and then we expect them to be able to transition from that to something else. If it's college, that's not easy. That's almost a chasm in between those two. We're creating new opportunities and pathways like all the folks on this panel. But again, parents and students need support trying to find their way. So the pathway from being a young person to having a thriving career or meaningful work, and or being able to really meaningfully feel engaged in and a part of and able to participate in our democracy and our communities is not an easy pathway. And so I truly appreciate the very intentional work that all of you are doing to make this possible. And I'm so happy we're going to be able to learn from it. And we are so grateful that we're going to be able to share it with the broader education community. Mike, is there anything you'd like to say before we wrap up?
You said it very well, LaVerne. It's been a real pleasure. Great to be a part of this.
All right. Well, thank you all. Thank you all for being here and joining us for this conversation. Take care.
Thank y'all.
Thank you. Bye.